from the shadowy corners of the underworld, where power and betrayal walk hand in hand, emerge stories that have not only dominated headlines, but have also shaken the foundations of societies across the globe. Today, we delve into the chilling mob hits that reshaped the criminal landscape and left an indelible mark on the world. These are not just stories of murder, they are pivotal moments that expose the sinister reach of organised crime, sparking outrage, fear, and ultimately, calls for justice. In the Roaring Twenties, Chicago was not just a city alive with jazz and speakeasies, it was also the epicenter of an intense gangland war fueled by prohibition. As illegal alcohol flowed through the city's veins, so did the ambitions of its most notorious gangsters. Prohibition wasn't just a ban on alcohol, it was a lucrative opportunity for the underworld. Two figures stood at the forefront of this shadow war: Al Capone, the infamous boss of the South Side Italian gang, and George "Bugs" Moran, the resilient leader of the North Side Irish gang. Capone, known for his charismatic yet ruthless disposition, saw the prohibition laws as a golden ticket to wealth and power. On the flip side, Moran, his fierce rival, commanded the North Side, challenging Capone's ambitions. Tensions between these two powerhouses simmered violently, each altercation inching closer to a boiling point. Capone decided it was time to strike a decisive blow to end the rivalry once and for all. Valentines Day, 1929. The plan was meticulous. A garage on North Clark Street, used by Moran's gang as a distribution point for their bootlegged alcohol, was chosen as the stage for this grim ballet. Posing as policemen, Capone's men were about to conduct one of the most infamous deceptions in the annals of American crime. Under the guise of a police raid, they entered the garage, catching Moran's men off guard. As the faux officers lined up 7 of Moran's gang members against the wall, the air was thick with tension. Then the silence shattered. In mere moments the floor was painted red, the walls pockmarked with bullets. The real police would find a gruesome tableau: 7 bodies, lifeless in a pool of betrayal and blood. The news exploded across the nation like the very bullets that tore through that garage. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre, as it would be known, became a symbol of the brutal violence underpinning Prohibition's decade. This wasn't merely a mob hit. It was a national spectacle that drew the federal government's gaze to the rampant lawlessness in Chicago. It spurred public demand for action, culminating in unprecedented crackdowns on organised crime. The fallout from the massacre was immense. Al Capone's involvement, though widely suspected, was never proven. But it led to his eventual downfall, as law enforcement, now under heavy public pressure, tightened the noose around his operations. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre remains one of the darkest moments in American history, a stark reminder of the costs of prohibition and the lengths to which men will go for power. In the latter half of the 20th century, Sicily was a stronghold of one of the most formidable criminal organizations in the world, Cosa Nostra. Under its grip, the island suffered from rampant corruption, violence, and a pervading sense of fear. Giovan Falcone moved through this world with a unique blend of calm determination and steely resolve. As a magistrate in Palermo, he was at the front line of Italy's legal battle against organised crime. But this was no ordinary fight. Falcone was not just prosecuting isolated criminals. He was challenging an entrenched power structure that had existed for over a century. Falcone's approach was revolutionary. He understood that to bring down the mafia, he needed to attack its roots, the complex networks of complicity that involved not only criminals, but also political figures and businessmen. His strategy led to the Maxi trial, a landmark event that began in 1986. The Maxi trial was unprecedented in its scope and ambition. Over 400 mafiosi were charged, based on a web of evidence that Falcone had painstakingly gathered. It was during this trial that the true extent of Cosa Nostra's reach and influence was laid bare for the world to see. But with high stakes came high risks. Falcone's success in court made him a marked man. The mafia, reeling from the convictions, was desperate to regain control and send a chilling message to anyone who dared challenge its authority. Falcone knew he was a target. He lived his life with the constant presence of bodyguards and took meticulous care in his movements. Yet he pressed on, driven by a deep-seated belief in justice and the rule of law. On the fateful day of May 23, 1992, Giovan Falcone's return to Sicily was meticulously tracked by Cosa Nostra. The mafia had placed informants within the security apparatus and had been alerted to Falcone's flight from Rome to Palermo. Under the cover of darkness several days before the planned assassination, mafia operatives smuggled a half-ton of explosives into a culvert under the A29 motorway. This location was strategically chosen. It was remote enough to avoid casual witnesses, yet critical on Falcone's usual route from the Palermo airport to his home. The explosives were wired to a remote detonator, giving the assassins the ability to trigger the blast at the precise moment Falcone's car drove over the spot. This level of coordination required not just technical expertise, but also precise timing and nerve. As Falcone's convoy approached, the assassins, hidden at a safe distance, waited for the exact moment to strike. At 17:58, as Falcone's blue Fiat Croma, escorted by 2 additional vehicles, neared the culvert, the button was pressed. The explosion was massive, instantly killing Falcone, his wife Francesca Morvillo, and 3 police bodyguards. The force of the blast was so powerful, it not only destroyed Falcone's car, but also created a crater 10 meters wide in the motorway, symbolizing the deep scar this event would leave on the psyche of the Italian nation. In the immediate aftermath, chaos ensued. The site quickly became a scene of devastation, with emergency services scrambling to make sense of the carnage. The brutal efficiency of the attack shook the entire country to its core. The assassination of Falcone was not just a successful hit against a single man, but a clear message from Cosa Nostra to the Italian state. No one was beyond their reach. But instead of instilling fear, the murder galvanized the public and government alike to renew and intensify their efforts against the mafia. As the 1970s unfolded, New York City found itself under the shadow of an unprecedented wave of organized crime. The mafia's influence permeated every corner of the city, from bustling street markets to the quiet corridors of power. At the heart of this dark era was Carmine Galante, a man whose ambition was only matched by his ruthlessness. Galante, often seen with a cigar clamped between his teeth, was not just any mobster. As a capo and later the acting boss of the Bonanno crime family, he had a particular penchant for the narcotics trade. Under his leadership, the Bonannos became the foremost heroin traffickers in the United States, amassing unimaginable wealth. Galante's operations extended across continents, but his refusal to distribute profits equitably among the other mafia families bred deep resentment. This greed set the stage for his downfall. By the late 1970s, members of the Commission, the governing body of the American Mafia, had grown increasingly alarmed at Galante's bold moves. This rogue capo was upsetting the delicate balance of power that had kept inter-family peace. Something had to be done. The plot to remove Galante from power was as secretive as it was deadly. Key figures in the commission, including bosses from the Gambino, Lucchese and Genovese families, sanctioned a hit to restore order and redistribute power. The execution plan was meticulously crafted. The chosen assassins were not from Galante's own Bonanno family, but were reputedly from the Lucchese and Gambino families, ensuring no trace back to a single disgruntled party. The day chosen was July 12, 1979. The location was Joe and Mary's Italian restaurant in Brooklyn, a known favourite of Galante's. The plan was simple yet brutal. Strike at lunch, when Galante would be most vulnerable. As Galante dined in the patio area, laughing with his trusted men, the hitmen stormed the garden. Dressed in ski masks and armed with shotguns and handguns, they showed no hesitation. The patio erupted in gunfire, leaving Galante and 2 of his bodyguards dead before any help could arrive. The aftermath of the assassination was chaotic. Galante's lifeless body, cigar still in his mouth, became a symbol of the bloody power struggles within the New York Mafia. His death was not just the end of a mob boss, but a stark message to all in the Mafia about the perils of greed and the harsh realities of power. The ripples of Carmine Galante's assassination were felt far beyond the streets of New York. The power vacuum led to a reorganization within the Bonanno family and shifted the dynamics of organized crime in the city. In the mid-1980s, New York City was not only the financial capital of the world, but also the epicenter of organized crime, where the Mafia's grip was as strong as the steel of the skyscrapers that lined its horizon. At the heart of this underworld was Paul Castellano, the boss of the powerful Gambino crime family. Paul Castellano, known as Big Paul for his imposing presence, ascended to the role of boss after the death of the legendary Carlo Gambino. Unlike his predecessors, Castellano was a businessman first and foremost. He expanded the family's interests into legitimate industries, but he did not shy away from the traditional rackets of loan sharking, gambling, and extortion. Despite his wealth and power, Castellano's leadership was contentious. He was seen by many underlings as aloof, overly focused on white-collar businesses, and out of touch with the street-level operations that many of the family's capos relied upon. Resentment within the ranks grew, fueled by Castellano's strict policies on drug trafficking, which he publicly condemned despite its profitability. This hypocrisy, coupled with his perceived arrogance, set the stage for betrayal. Enter John Gotti, an ambitious capo with a striking contrast in style to Castellano. Charismatic and street-smart, Gotti was deeply involved in the lucrative drug trade that Castellano had forbidden. Gotti saw Castellano's rules as both hypocritical and a direct threat to his revenue streams. As the tension reached a boiling point, Gotti began to plot Castellano's demise, seeking support from influential members of the family and even reaching out to other mafia families who shared his disdain for Castellano's leadership. The plan was bold and risky. On December 16, 1985, as the city was draped in Christmas lights, Gotti set his plan into motion. Castellano was lured to a meeting at Sparks Steakhouse on Manhattan's busy East 46th Street, a public place where the hit would send shockwaves through the underworld and beyond. As Castellano and Bilotti stepped out of their black Lincoln Town car, under the guise of a holiday dinner, gunmen in trench coats and Russian hats approached. Without a word, they opened fire. Within seconds, Castellano and Bilotti lay dead on the cold, wet pavement, the stark flash of muzzle fire against the winter night serving as a brutal punctuation to Gotti's ruthless ambition. The murder of Paul Castellano was a turning point. It was not just a hit, it was a coup. John Gotti's brazen move to kill a sitting boss without the sanction of the Mafia's commission was unprecedented and changed the rules of engagement in the mob. The assassination of Paul Castellano signalled a new era for the Gambino family and the Mafia at large. It was a display of brutal power that reshaped the landscape of organised crime, underscoring the volatile and deadly nature of its politics. In the late 1980s, Sicily was a land of stark contrasts, breathtaking beauty overshadowed by the dark veil of Mafia influence. Among those daring to challenge this power was Rosario Liino, a judge whose youth belied a formidable resolve. Rosario Liino worked as a magistrate in Agrigento, a town where the Mafia's roots ran deep. Known affectionately as the boy judge, Livatino was distinguished not only by his age, but by his fearless pursuit of justice, often walking the tightrope over an abyss of legal and mortal dangers. Tasked with handling juvenile crime initially, Livatino soon found himself at the forefront of major anti-mafia trials. His dedication to upholding the law made him a beacon of hope in a region plagued by corruption and fear. Judge Rosario Livatino's commitment to justice was unyielding, but it made him a marked man in the eyes of the mafia. His daily commute, once a routine drive through the Sicilian landscape, became the stage for a deadly ambush. On the morning of September 21, 1990, the hitmen, employed by the local mafia, had already positioned themselves strategically along his usual route. They knew Livatino's habits, including the solitary nature of his commute, which made him an easier target. The assassins used 2 vehicles to execute their plan. As Livatino approached, they coordinated via hand signals, a silent but deadly dance of death orchestrated without a word. One vehicle pulled out in front of Livatino's car, forcing him to slow down, while the second car boxed him in from behind, eliminating any chance of escape. Trapped and isolated, Livatino faced his assailants alone. 4 men, masked and armed, quickly surrounded the car. Without hesitation, they opened fire, shattering the morning silence with the roar of gunfire. The gunmen showed no mercy. Livatino was hit multiple times, his vehicle becoming his temporary shelter as he desperately tried to survive the initial onslaught. In a final act of defiance, or perhaps seeking a sliver of safety, Livatino managed to exit his car and staggered towards a nearby vineyard. But his injuries were severe, and he collapsed, a tragic end for a man who had devoted his life to upholding the law. The murder of Rosario Livatino was not just an assassination, it was a calculated message from the mafia to the judiciary and the state. No one was beyond their reach. But instead of instilling fear, Livatino's death galvanized the nation. His martyrdom led to enhanced protections for judges and a renewed crackdown on mafia activities. Livatino's legacy lives on, inspiring those who continue the fight against organized crime. Philadelphia, known for its rich history and vibrant culture, was also the stage for one of the most shocking mob-related murders in American organized crime. Angelo Bruno, known affectionately as the Gentle Don, ruled the Philadelphia Mafia with a blend of old-world charm and a business-first acumen that earned him respect far beyond the city's boundaries. Bruno had led the Philadelphia family for 2 decades, steering clear of the typical gangland violence associated with mafia disputes. His leadership was marked by a preference for bribery and business dealings over bloodshed, which endeared him to both mobsters and law enforcement as a stabilizing force. Despite his peaceful reign, not everyone was content under Bruno's leadership. His aversion to narcotics trafficking and his tight control over lucrative rackets created dissent among the ranks, particularly with younger members eager to exploit the burgeoning drug trade. Among the discontented was his own consigliere, Antonio Caponigro, also known as Tony Bananas. Caponigro harboured ambitions of leading the family and began to conspire against Bruno, believing that the removal of the Gentle Don would allow a more aggressive approach to the mafia's operations. The plot to kill Bruno was set in motion without the sanction of the Commission, the governing body of the American Mafia, which later proved to be a fatal miscalculation for Caponigro. On a quiet March evening, as Bruno returned home from dinner, his car pulled up to his modest house in South Philadelphia. As he sat in the car, chatting idly with his driver, the assassin, believed to be a trusted friend, approached the vehicle under the guise of a friendly conversation. With no prior indication, the gunman raised a shotgun and fired a single fatal blast to the back of Bruno's head, executing him with chilling efficiency that left the Philadelphia Mafia in shock and disarray. The assassination of Angelo Bruno shattered the relative peace that had defined the Philadelphia underworld. His death opened the floodgates to a violent power struggle that would consume the family for years. Tony Caponigro was soon found dead, his body brutally beaten and stuffed with dollar bills, a stark message from the commission condemning his unauthorized hit. The brutal cleanup did not stop with Caponigro. It marked the beginning of a bloody chapter in the family's history. As we close the chapter on these chilling tales of mob violence and betrayal, we're reminded of the profound impact these events have had on societies around the world. From the shadowy streets of Chicago to the corridors of power in Sicily, the echoes of these mob hits resonate, not just in the annals of crime, but in the collective memory of nations. They serve as stark reminders of the cost of power and the relentless pursuit of justice by those who dare to stand against the tide of organized crime.